A shadow moves silently through the fog, a secret carried on the cold night air. History is filled with these silent moments, where the real story happened in the shadows, far from public view. We often hear about the legendary spies, but what about the missions that vanished without a trace? The agents who disappeared into the mist, the secrets so well kept, they have baffled experts for centuries. Today, we become detectives, sifting through the evidence of 25 of the most compelling unsolved cases of historical espionage. You will gain a front row seat to the greatest puzzles that spies and codebreakers have ever faced. We will explore a French prisoner whose face was hidden behind iron, and a treasure of imperial gold that vanished into the chaos of revolution. Which of these silent stories do you think holds the most explosive truth? Our journey begins not in the shadows of a war, but within the gilded cage of absolute power. For 34 years, a single prisoner was held in the fortresses of France, his face perpetually hidden behind a mask of black velvet, and later, according to legend, iron. This is the story of the man in the iron mask, a mystery that epitomizes the absolute control of King Louis XIV, the Sun King. His identity was so dangerous, so potentially explosive to the state, that it had to be erased from existence. The prisoner was treated with a strange deference, given fine food and clothing, yet the mask never came off. Guards were ordered to kill him if he ever tried to reveal his face. Who was this man, and what secret did he hold that demanded such an elaborate and permanent silence? The theories are as numerous as they are compelling. Was he a disgraced noble who had offended the king, or perhaps the illegitimate older brother of Louis XIV, a living threat to the legitimacy of the throne? Some even speculated he was the king's own twin, hidden away to prevent a crisis of succession. Each possibility points to a secret so profound that the entire machinery of the French state was mobilized to bury it. The true genius of this espionage operation, if we can call it that, lies in its flawless execution. Official records were meticulously scrubbed. No definitive document survives that names him. The few letters that mention him refer only to a prisoner of great importance. The state did not just imprison a man, it erased him, creating a human enigma that has outlasted the kingdom that created him. This case is the ultimate state secret, a piece of counterintelligence so successful that we are left wondering not just about the victim, but about the perpetrators. What were they so terrified we would discover? The mask was not merely a punishment, it was a message, a permanent assertion that some truths are too dangerous to ever see the light. While the iron mask was meant to conceal a single identity, our next case involves a secret message that was intercepted precisely to reveal its contents to the world. The story of the Zimmermann telegram is one of the greatest intelligence coups of the 20th century, but its success created an enduring mystery. We know what the message said: a German proposal for Mexico to join the war against the United States, with the promise of reclaiming Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. We know the brilliant British codebreakers in Room 40 decoded it. The great unsolved puzzle is not the message itself, but how British intelligence physically obtained a copy of the encrypted telegram without Germany ever discovering their diplomatic codes were fatally compromised. This was a masterstroke of espionage counterintelligence, a delicate operation where revealing what you know can be as dangerous as knowing nothing at all. The British had to get the telegram into American hands to draw the United States into the Great War, but they had to do it in a way that protected their ultimate asset, their ability to read secret German communications. If Germany realized their codes were broken, they would change them immediately, blinding British intelligence. So, how did they pull it off without leaving a trace? Theories have swirled for decades, One persistent idea points to a potential leak from within the German embassy itself, perhaps a disgruntled clerk who provided a copy of the encoded text. Another, more complex theory suggests the British did not intercept the original German diplomatic cable at all. Instead, they may have covertly acquired a copy of the same message when it was retransmitted through a neutral country, Sweden, using a different set of codes. This would have provided the needed text while creating a plausible alternative source for the leak, shielding the fact that Room 40 could read the main German cipher. The truth is, the exact method remains one of the most closely guarded secrets of British intelligence. The official records are silent, and the details are buried so deep that historians still debate the precise tradecraft used. This was not a simple interception, it was a strategic deception of the highest order. The entire operation was a carefully staged play, where every prop and every actor had to convince the audience, in this case, the American government and the German High Command, that the revelation was an accident, not a calculated intelligence breach. The success of the mission hinged on this illusion, making the method of acquisition, the real and still unsolved secret at the heart of a world-changing event. How do you hide the source of a truth so powerful it can alter the course of a global war? That question leads us from a secret meant to be revealed to a treasure that was meant to disappear forever. That question of hiding a powerful truth echoes across the decades, from the coded cables of the Great War to the vast, empty skies of the Cold War. High above the frozen wilderness of Alaska, in November 1986, the crew of Japan Airlines Flight 1628, a simple cargo plane, found themselves at the center of an aerial encounter so bizarre it defies explanation. This was not a typical spy mission, but it unfolded in the tense theater of superpower rivalry, becoming an enduring espionage mystery in its own right. The captain and his crew were seasoned, sober professionals, not given to fantasy. Yet what they reported that night was a massive, silent object, larger than 2 aircraft carriers, that paced their plane with impossible agility. It executed maneuvers that defied known physics, sudden stops, and instantaneous accelerations, all without a sound. Military radar from Elmendorf Air Force Base briefly confirmed an unknown presence in their vicinity, adding a layer of hard data to the incredible testimony. So, what was this silent giant in the sky? The most plausible theories point directly to the shadowy world of Cold War espionage and weapons testing. Was this a secret, experimental American aircraft, perhaps a prototype stealth vehicle, or one utilizing revolutionary propulsion, being tested in the remote Alaskan corridor? Or was it a Soviet counterpart, a technological marvel sneaking through American airspace to probe their defenses? The sheer size and performance of the object suggest a project of immense scale and secrecy, the kind of asset a nation would go to great lengths to conceal and deny. Another, more unsettling possibility is that the crew itself was the target of an experiment. Could this have been a psychological operation or an electronic warfare test, using advanced projected imagery or radar, spoofing to disorient and study the reactions of a civilian crew? This would explain the conflicting data and the object's seemingly impossible behavior, framing the entire event as a cruel and deceptive act of espionage conducted against an unsuspecting civilian aircraft. The official investigations yielded no definitive answers. Both American and Soviet authorities, of course, denied any knowledge. The credibility of the pilots and the flicker of radar confirmation ensure this case remains open, a stark reminder that some of the greatest secrets of the Cold War were not buried in vaults, but flown in plain sight, leaving behind only questions. Which superpower was flying that night, and what were they testing? The truth remains locked in a classified file, somewhere, leaving us to wonder what other technological marvels or menaces were developed in the absolute secrecy of that long, silent struggle. From the silent skies of the Cold War, we descend into the hushed libraries of the Renaissance, where a different kind of secret is bound in vellum. A book sits on a shelf, its pages filled with a script no one on earth can read, illustrating plants that have never grown and celestial charts that map no known sky. This is the Voynich Manuscript, a code that has defied every attempt at understanding for centuries. Discovered by a Polish book dealer named Wilfrid Voynich in 1912, the manuscript is immediately unsettling. Its 240 pages are a symphony of the bizarre, written in an unknown alphabet and adorned with drawings of unidentifiable herbal specimens, naked women bathing in strange green pools, and intricate astrological diagrams that seem to blend science with pure fantasy. But what if this was not a book of botany or magic, but a sophisticated tool of espionage? The theory that this was a codebook for a Renaissance spy ring is one of the most compelling. In an age of shifting political alliances and clandestine plots, a cipher that looked like an eccentric scholar's notebook would be the perfect disguise. Sensitive information, perhaps troop movements, political assassinations, or the secrets of alchemy, could be hidden in plain sight, transmitted between agents under the very noses of their enemies. The potential authors read like a who is who of historical intrigue. Was it the brilliant Franciscan friar Roger Bacon, encoding advanced scientific knowledge he feared would be condemned as heresy? Or was it the enigmatic John Dee, court astrologer to Queen Elizabeth I and a man deeply involved in her secret intelligence network, using the book to communicate with his vast web of continental spies? The manuscript's resistance to modern code breaking is what makes the espionage theory so powerful. The best cryptanalysts from both world wars, the very people who cracked the infamous enigma codes, have turned their skills to this ancient text and failed completely. Its internal structure shows patterns consistent with a natural language, yet it corresponds to no known tongue. This has led some to a radically different conclusion, that the entire thing is an elaborate and brilliant hoax, crafted to deceive a wealthy patron into paying a fortune for a worthless, nonsensical book. But if it is a hoax, why is it so complex, so meticulously detailed? And if it is a genuine cipher, what monumental secret was so dangerous that it required a lock that no key has ever opened? The Voynich Manuscript remains a silent witness, its pages holding either the operational secrets of a long-vanished spy network or the proof of one of history's most audacious and successful deceptions. We are left to wonder if we are staring at a masterpiece of clandestine communication or a work of pure, genius-level fiction. A book that no one can read presents one kind of mystery, but an entire fortune that simply vanished presents another, on a scale almost too vast to comprehend. In the chaotic aftermath of the Russian Revolution, a treasure of staggering proportions disappeared from the face of the earth. This was the imperial gold reserve of Tsar Nicholas II, a hoard of gold bars and coins valued in the billions of today's dollars. As the White Russian forces, loyal to the old regime, fought a desperate civil war against the Bolshevik Red Army, they took physical control of this gold, loading it onto a heavily guarded train. Their mission was to transport it east across Siberia to the port of Vladivostok. The plan was to use this colossal wealth as collateral to secure loans, weapons, and support from the Allied powers, including Britain, France, and the United States. This train was not just a cargo shipment, it was the entire financial future of a counter-revolution, and every spy and intelligence service on the continent knew it. The espionage angle here is profound. The Bolsheviks were determined to retrieve their nation's wealth, and they had a formidable network of agents and sympathizers infiltrating white-held territories. Did these agents manage to redirect the train or sabotage its journey? Or were the Allied powers themselves, ostensibly allies of the White Russians, not entirely trustworthy? There were persistent rumors that British or Japanese intelligence operatives intercepted the gold, secretly seizing it to fund their own post-war agendas or to control the outcome of the Russian conflict. The theories about its final fate are as dramatic as any spy novel. One of the most enduring legends claims the treasure lies at the bottom of the deep, frozen waters of Lake Baikal. The story goes that during the harsh winter, the train was being transported across the lake on special tracks laid over the ice. A terrible accident, or perhaps enemy artillery fire, caused the ice to fracture, sending the entire train and its priceless cargo into the abyss. Expeditions have searched the lake for decades, but its immense depth and shifting sediments have kept the secret, if it is there, perfectly safe. Another theory suggests the gold never made it that far. It was systematically plundered by the various warlords and foreign intervention forces that controlled sections of the Trans-Siberian Railway, broken into smaller caches and dispersed to fund decades of anti-communist activities across Europe and Asia. This would mean the treasure was not lost in one single event, but deliberately scattered and spent, its pieces now untraceable. The true mystery is not just one of location, but of betrayal and brilliant espionage. Was the treasure stolen in one grand, audacious act, or was it a death by 1,000 cuts, a slow bleed of assets orchestrated by unseen hands? The disappearance of the Tsar's gold remains the ultimate heist, a void where a kingdom's ransom should be, leaving us to ask who, in the end, truly profited from a revolution's chaos. The mystery of a vanished treasure's fate is one of grand scale, but the secret of a single man's identity can be just as powerful. We all know the name James Bond, but the true identity of the spy who inspired him is a puzzle that remains tantalizingly unsolved. Ian Fleming always maintained his character was a composite, yet the search for the real man behind the fiction points to several shadowy figures whose own stories are buried in classified files. One of the most compelling candidates is a man Fleming knew personally, William Stephenson, a Canadian industrialist turned spymaster. Codenamed Intrepid, Stephenson was not a field agent, but a master architect of secrets. He was tasked by Winston Churchill himself with establishing and running the entire British Security Coordination Office in New York City during World War II. His mission was immense: to covertly sway American public opinion and secure vital aid for Britain before the United States had even entered the war, all while operating from a suite of offices in Rockefeller Center. This was espionage on a diplomatic and propaganda level, a silent war fought in newspaper editorials and corporate boardrooms. Stephenson's influence was so pervasive and his methods so effective that many of his operations remain classified even today, leaving the full scope of his activities to speculation. He was the quiet man in the background, pulling strings that altered the course of history, a reality far more nuanced than any fictional martini order. Yet Fleming's own experiences add another layer to the mystery. Before he was an author, he served as the personal assistant to the Director of British Naval Intelligence during the war. In that role, he was present at the highest levels of planning for audacious covert operations, and he met a vast network of extraordinary agents. He was a collector of characters, and James Bond may well be the ultimate product of that collection. The debate continues because the truth is likely a mosaic. Was Bond the daring, womanizing double agent Dusko Popov, or the quiet, strategic genius of William Stephenson? Or was he born from a dozen different men, their most remarkable traits combined into a single, perfect spy, by an author who knew the real world of secrets all too well. The real James Bond is not one man, but a ghost, a carefully constructed legend built from the whispers and deeds of many. The ultimate secret that Fleming took to his grave was the exact recipe for his creation, leaving us to forever wonder which of history's real shadows cast the longest over our most famous fictional spy. Deep within the Catherine Palace, a room glowed with a warm, honeyed light. This was the Amber Room, a chamber entirely paneled in carved amber, gold leaf, and brilliant mirrors, a gift from Prussia to Russia's Peter the Great. It was so magnificent, so unlike anything else, that it was often called the eighth wonder of the world. For 2 centuries, it stood as a symbol of opulence and diplomacy, a treasure beyond price. Then came the war. In 1941, as Nazi forces advanced on Leningrad, they reached the palace. Recognizing the room's immense value, they did not destroy it. Instead, with chilling efficiency, German troops carefully disassembled the panels, packed them into crates, and shipped them to Königsberg Castle in East Prussia, where they were put on display as a trophy of conquest. But the room's journey was not over. In 1944, as the Soviet Red Army closed in on Königsberg, the panels were packed away once more, and then they simply vanished from the face of the earth. The question of what happened next is one of the greatest cultural mysteries of the 20th century. Was the room destroyed in the fierce Allied bombing raids that reduced much of Königsberg to rubble? Some witnesses claim to have seen the crates in the castle cellars just before the firestorms, leading to the tragic theory that this unparalleled work of art was lost forever to flames. A more tantalizing possibility involves a German cargo ship, the Wilhelm Gustloff. This vessel, tragically overloaded with refugees, was torpedoed and sunk in the Baltic Sea in January 1945. Could the crates have been part of its final, desperate cargo, now lying at the bottom of the sea amidst a maritime grave? The most persistent theory, however, is that the Nazis hid the room to preserve it. As the Reich collapsed, a special unit dedicated to looting art treasures may have secreted the panels away in a salt mine, a deep forest, or the forgotten cellar of a castle, its location known only to a handful of high-ranking officers. If that is true, then the secret of the Amber Room may have died with those officers in the final, chaotic days of the war. For decades, treasure hunters and government agencies have searched for it, following cryptic clues and old maps, but every lead has dissolved into nothing. This was not just the theft of art, it was an act of cultural espionage, a deliberate attempt to capture and possess a nation's soul. The empty space in the Catherine Palace, now filled with a modern reconstruction, is a permanent reminder of a beauty that was stolen and a secret that has been kept for almost 80 years. Where could a treasure that large possibly hide? While empires clashed and treasures vanished, the success of a revolution often hinged on the courage of a single, unseen individual. During the desperate early years of the American Revolution, George Washington was not just a general, he was a spy master, and his most vital weapon was an invisible web of informants known as the Culper Ring. This small, tightly knit group operated in the very heart of British-occupied New York, and their most enduring mystery is not a document or a treasure, but a person known to history only by her code number, 355. In the cryptic language of the ring, the number 355 stood for Lady, a designation of both respect and absolute secrecy. She was more than just a member, she was a pivotal asset, a woman who moved through the drawing rooms and markets of the occupied city, her true allegiance hidden behind a mask of social conformity. Her greatest contribution was information so critical, it helped save the American cause itself. She provided the key intelligence that exposed the treason of Benedict Arnold, the American hero who had turned his coat. and which led directly to the capture of his British contact, the charming and dangerous Major John Andre. Without her, the plot might have succeeded, and the course of the war could have been catastrophically altered. But who was she? The hunt for her identity is a historical detective story with no final answer. One compelling theory suggests she was a member of a prominent loyalist family, using her social access to overhear the careless conversations of British officers who never suspected the woman pouring their tea was memorizing their every word. This would have been the perfect cover, placing her at the center of enemy activity. Another possibility paints a different picture, that she was a maid or a servant within a British household, invisible due to her station, able to read letters left on desks and listen at closed doors. The mystery of her fate is just as profound. After Major Andre was captured and hanged as a spy, the British conducted a furious hunt for the leak. Was Agent 355 uncovered? There are haunting suggestions that she was arrested and imprisoned aboard the infamous British prison ships in New York Harbor, floating hells where thousands of Americans perished from disease and neglect. Did she die there, her name lost, her sacrifice unknown, or did she, against all odds, survive? Perhaps she simply closed her secret life, married, and moved away, carrying the immense weight of her actions in silence for the rest of her days. A hero who never sought or received recognition. The power of her story lies in that silence. She represents every anonymous individual who risked everything for a cause, whose deeds were swallowed by history, leaving only a number, a ghost, and a debt we can never fully repay. The silent sacrifice of Agent 355 stands in stark contrast to a death that demanded the world's attention, yet revealed nothing. On the 1st of December 1948, on Somerton Beach near Adelaide, Australia, a man was found lying peacefully in the sand, well-dressed and physically fit, but utterly without life. There was no sign of violence, no wallet, no identification of any kind. The labels had been meticulously cut from all his clothing, a classic espionage technique to erase a person's origin. In a hidden pocket, sewn into his trousers, investigators found a small, tightly rolled scrap of paper. It bore just 2 printed words, Tamam Shud, which is Persian for ended or finished. This single clue would unravel into one of the most baffling potential spy cases of the nascent Cold War. The scrap was traced to a very specific edition of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, a book of Persian poetry. A local man came forward, realizing he had found the book in his car weeks earlier, and in the back of this book was a sequence of letters, handwritten in code, a message that has never been deciphered. The man himself was an enigma. He was in superb physical condition, with highly developed calves and a posture that suggested military training, yet his fingerprints matched no known records in any allied country. The espionage theory is almost inescapable. This was the dawn of the Cold War, a time when Australia was a significant partner in Western intelligence efforts and a potential target for Soviet infiltration. Was the Somerton man a spy, perhaps a Soviet agent operating under deep cover? His death, which an autopsy suggested was likely due to a rare, undetectable poison, points to a silent, professional assassination following a failed rendezvous. The code in the book was not a simple cipher. It was a complex sequence that has resisted decades of cryptanalysis, even by top code breakers from that era. This suggests it contained not a personal note, but operational details, names, locations, or mission parameters that were meant to be understood by only one other person. Who was he working for? The presence of Persian poetry could hint at operations in Iran, a hotbed of early Cold War intrigue, or it could simply be an ingenious, culturally obscure method of passing messages. The most haunting possibility is that Tamam Shud was not just a clue, but his final signal, a message to his handlers that the mission was over, that he was finished. Modern science has tried to solve the mystery. DNA was extracted, yet it has not provided a definitive identity, only ruling out some distant family claims. We are left with the same questions that haunted investigators 75 years ago. Who was this man? What secret did his code hold? And which side in the Great Silent War was he on when he ended his life on that lonely Australian beach? The silent, solitary death of the Somerton man presents a mystery of identity erased. But history also holds a case where identity was consumed by a collective madness. In the sweltering summer of 1518, the city of Strasbourg was gripped by a phenomenon that defied all reason. It began with a single woman, Frau Trophia, who stepped into the street and began to dance. There was no music, no celebration, only a compulsive, relentless movement she could not control. Within a week, dozens had joined her. Within a month, the streets were filled with over 400 people, their bodies contorting in a desperate, ceaseless rhythm. They did not stop to eat or sleep. They danced until their feet were bloody and their ribs cracked, dancing through pain and exhaustion until many dropped dead from heart attacks or sheer physical collapse. The local authorities were baffled. Physicians of the time blamed an imbalance of bodily humors, a diagnosis that offered no cure. In a desperate attempt to end the plague, they did the very thing that seemed to make the least sense. They built a stage and hired musicians, believing the dancers needed to dance the fever out of their systems. This only seemed to fuel the frenzy, turning a medical crisis into a public spectacle of suffering. For centuries, the dominant explanations have been rooted in science and sociology. The most accepted theory points to mass psychogenic illness, a form of mass hysteria triggered by the extreme stress of famine, disease, and profound social upheaval that had gripped the region. In this state of collective anxiety, one person's psychological break could have become a contagious template for others, a physical manifestation of shared, unspoken terror. Another compelling theory involves ergot poisoning. Ergot is a fungus that grows on damp rye, a staple grain of the time. When ingested, it can cause violent muscle spasms, convulsions, and hallucinations, symptoms that could easily be misinterpreted as a frenzied dance. The fungus also contains precursors to LSD, which could explain the trance-like states and the loss of bodily control. But what if the trigger was not an accident of nature or psychology? Could the dancing plague have been an act of early, primitive espionage? This is a fringe theory, but a chilling one. In an era of constant political and religious conflict, Strasbourg was a strategic prize. A rival power or a secretive faction seeking to destabilize the city and its resources might have employed a terrifying new weapon. The method could have been biochemical, perhaps introducing a toxic substance like ergot into the grain supply deliberately, a calculated act of sabotage. Or, more sinister still, it could have been an experiment in psychological warfare. Could agents have infiltrated the population, using suggestion, fear, or even an early form of hypnosis to plant the seed of compulsive behavior in a vulnerable individual, knowing it would spread like a virus through the superstitious and stressed community? There is, of course, no direct evidence for this. The perpetrators, if they existed, left no boastful letters or captured agents to confess. The true horror of the espionage theory is its effectiveness. A city's workforce, its social order, and its very sanity were completely broken without a single army being mobilized, without a single sword being drawn. The dancing was the weapon, and the trigger for that weapon remains one of history's most deeply buried secrets. Was it a natural disaster, a psychological chain reaction, or the successful field test of a clandestine tactic so effective that its creators took the formula to their graves. While the dancing plague was a mystery of mass psychology, another ancient puzzle was deliberately carved into metal, meant for only a handful of eyes to ever see. Among the famed Dead Sea Scrolls, one stands completely apart. It is not a religious text or a philosophical treatise, but a straightforward inventory of unimaginable wealth. This is the Copper Scroll, and it was discovered not as a fragile roll of parchment, but as two oxidized rolls of metal, so brittle they had to be cut apart to be read. Its message, hammered into the soft copper in a cruder, more colloquial form of Hebrew, is breathtakingly direct. It lists 64 specific locations where vast quantities of gold and silver are supposedly buried. The amounts are not trivial, they are staggering, describing tons of precious metal and countless coins, a treasure that would be worth billions today. The immediate, tantalizing question is whether this is a genuine treasure map or an elaborate work of fiction. The espionage angle here is profound. The scroll dates from a time of immense turmoil, around the 1st century, when Roman legions were crushing the Jewish revolt. The most compelling theory is that this scroll details the hidden treasury of the Second Temple in Jerusalem, a sacred fortune smuggled out and secreted away to prevent its capture by the invading Romans. This would make the Copper Scroll an act of ultimate financial counterintelligence, a record of a desperate operation to save a nation's soul from pillage. But why write it on copper, and why in such a rough, accessible language? The durability of metal suggests the information was meant to last, to be recovered and acted upon later. The simple Hebrew implies it was written not for high priests, but for practical-minded rebels or a secretive sect who needed clear, unambiguous instructions. This was not a document for public worship, it was a classified operational file. Its true genius as an espionage tool lies in its cryptic geography. The directions are maddeningly vague, referring to local landmarks that have been lost to 2,000 years of erosion and development. It speaks of a ruined aqueduct, a specific dam, a tomb with a hidden cavity. These were clues that would have been instantly recognizable to a local cell of operatives, but are utterly meaningless to an outsider, especially a Roman official. The scroll was their secure, permanent record, a list of caches known only to a trusted few. This secrecy raises another possibility, that the treasure was successfully recovered by that very sect, leaving the scroll as an empty shell, a decoy, or simply an obsolete record they abandoned. Modern expeditions have tried to follow its trail. Archaeologists and treasure hunters, armed with the translated text, have dug at sites that seem to match the descriptions. They have excavated near Jericho, searched beneath ancient pools, and scanned caves. Every single effort has come up completely empty. Not a single coin, not a single bar of gold has ever been found. This relentless failure fuels the alternate theory that the entire thing is a magnificent fabrication, a piece of folklore, or a test of faith for a religious community. Yet the sheer, mundane practicality of the list, written on expensive and durable copper, argues against it being a mere fantasy, so we are left with a haunting enigma. Did a band of desperate rebels pull off the greatest heist in antiquity, burying a kingdom's ransom in the Judean desert, their secret dying with the last person who knew the true meaning of the landmarks? Or are we chasing a 2,000-year-old ghost, a treasure that never was, written on a metal that has outlasted the very civilization it was meant to preserve? The Copper Scroll does not give up its secrets. Chinese letter remains a locked vault, its combination lost to the desert winds. The clatter of aristocratic life was shattered on a cold November night in 1974. In a luxurious London townhouse, the children's nanny, Sandra Rivet, was found brutally murdered in the basement. The prime suspect was her employer, Lord Lucan, a handsome earl from one of Britain's most esteemed families. He had vanished into the night, leaving behind his car, abandoned and blood-stained, near the English Channel. The official story was one of domestic tragedy, a man snapping under the pressure of a bitter custody battle, mistakenly killing the nanny in a botched attack on his wife. But the deeper you look, the more this case reads not like a simple crime of passion, but like a sophisticated exfiltration, an espionage operation conducted on British soil. Lord Lucan was no ordinary aristocrat. He was a man deeply enmeshed in a shadow world, a high-stakes gambler who moved in circles where international finance blurred seamlessly with clandestine intelligence. His disappearance was too clean, too absolute, for a man on the run alone. He had no passport, no large sums of cash readily on hand, yet he evaporated without a trace. This points to a far more chilling possibility, that Lucan did not flee justice, but was smuggled out of the United Kingdom by a network of powerful, well-connected friends. These were men with the means and the motive to spirit a wanted man across borders, men who may have had one foot in the gentlemen's clubs of London and the other in the secretive corridors of MI6. The why is the real mystery. Was it merely old-school loyalty, the upper-class closing ranks to protect one of their own from scandal, or was there a more pressing, more dangerous reason? Lucan, through his gambling and financial dealings, would have been privy to sensitive information about the British elite, their secrets, their vulnerabilities, and perhaps even their connections to foreign intelligence operations. He was a walking liability. This gives rise to two darkly compelling theories. The first is that he was given a new identity and a comfortable life in exile, perhaps in South Africa or on a quiet estate in Kenya, protected by a vow of silence from his powerful benefactors. This would explain the numerous, persistent sightings reported around the world for decades. The second, more final theory is that he was not exfiltrated to safety, but eliminated. His network of friends may have decided that a living, talking Lucan was too great a risk. A quiet disappearance, followed by a silent, permanent end, would have been the neatest solution, a way to bury the secrets he carried forever. His ultimate fate, then, would not be a mystery of a fugitive, but a state secret, a piece of counterintelligence known only to a handful of spy masters. The empty chair at the aristocratic dinner table is a permanent question. Did a network of spies help a murderer vanish to protect one man, or to protect the secrets of an entire class? While the Lucan case involved the powerful protecting their own, another vanishing act was pulled off by a man with no name at all. On a stormy November night in 1971, a man who called himself Dan Cooper bought a one-way ticket for Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305 from Portland to Seattle. He was ordinary looking, wearing a business suit and dark sunglasses. Once the plane was airborne, he calmly handed a note to a flight attendant. It stated he had a bomb in his briefcase and that he wanted $200,000 in cash and 4 parachutes. His demeanor was not that of a frantic criminal, but of a man conducting a business transaction. When the plane landed in Seattle to exchange the passengers for the ransom, he released everyone, kept a few crew members, and ordered the pilot to fly to Mexico City. Then, somewhere over the dense, rainy wilderness of southwestern Washington, he did the unthinkable. He lowered the rear air stairs of the Boeing 727, and with the ransom money in a bag tied to his waist, he jumped into the darkness and vanished. The sheer audacity of the act was matched only by its flawless execution. This was not a panicked escape. It was a meticulously planned exfiltration. Every detail suggests a deep and professional understanding of aviation and survival. He specifically requested the older, manually operated back stairs, knowing they could be lowered in flight. He asked for the specific type of parachutes, including a dummy reserve, showing he knew equipment and could anticipate a potential trap. His calm under pressure was absolute. He never raised his voice, never showed panic, even as he navigated a hijacking and a dangerous parachute jump into a stormy night. This unshakable composure is why so many investigators believe D.B. Cooper was not a common criminal. His profile points directly to someone with advanced training, a former military paratrooper, a mercenary, or even an intelligence operative using his skills for a private mission. The espionage-like tradecraft was impeccable. He left no fingerprints on the plane, the ransom note, or the tie he left behind. He used an alias that led to a dead end. He chose a jump zone that was a perfect natural labyrinth, a vast expanse of forested mountains and rivers where a person could disappear forever. The ultimate question is whether his brilliant plan was also a suicide mission. Did he survive the jump? For years, the answer seemed to be a definitive no. The conditions were terrible. He was jumping into a freezing storm with no proper survival gear, wearing just a business suit and loafers. It seemed impossible. Then, in 1980, a young boy playing on the banks of the Columbia River unearthed a rotting package. It contained 294 decaying $20 bills, all with serial numbers that matched the ransom money. This was the only piece of the treasure ever found. It proved that at least some of the money had made it to the ground, but it did not prove Cooper survived. He could have perished in the jump, and the money bag could have been scattered by animals or weather years later. The discovery of the cache only deepened the mystery. If he did live, why was none of the rest of the money ever spent? The serial numbers were circulated to every bank in the country, yet not a single other bill has ever surfaced. This is the final, baffling silence. It suggests that if Cooper survived, he never used his legendary haul, perhaps because it was too hot to handle, or perhaps because the money was never the real point of the exercise at all. The FBI investigated over 1,000 suspects, from disgruntled military veterans to a man who matched the composite sketch perfectly and had the specific knowledge of the Boeing 727. Yet every lead evaporated. The case was officially closed decades later, no closer to an answer. D.B. Cooper achieved the ultimate ghost, a man who executed a perfect crime, not through violence, but through sheer, chilling competence, leaving behind only a cold trail, a few decaying bills, and a legend that asks how one man can so completely erase himself from the world. A perfect crime leaves only questions, but the ultimate secret leaves a language no one can speak. Deep within the ruins of the Minoan palace of Phaistos on the island of Crete, a fired clay disk sleeps. It is not large, but its surface is a breathtaking puzzle, a spiral of 241 individual symbols, each stamped into the clay with a precision that speaks of purpose. This is the Phaistos disk, a message from the second millennium before the Common Era, and its code has defied understanding for over 3,000 years. The script is unique, found nowhere else on Earth. It is not Linear O or Linear B, the other known scripts of the Minoan world. This is a solitary language, a one-of-a-kind document that was created and then seemingly lost to time. The sheer isolation of its design is what makes the espionage theory so compelling. In an age of burgeoning palace economies and rival city-states across the Mediterranean, information was power. Could this disk have been a sophisticated tool for securing that power? Imagine a Minoan diplomat or a royal agent carrying this disk between palaces. To any prying eyes, it would be an unreadable curiosity, but to the intended recipient, someone with the key, those stamped symbols could reveal anything from a secret trade route for prized obsidian to the movements of a rival king's navy, or even the blueprint for a political assassination. The physical nature of the disk itself supports this. The symbols were not carved by hand, but stamped using pre-made seals, a form of primitive movable type that would not be seen again for over 1,000 years. This suggests the creator intended to produce multiple, identical copies of the same message for distribution, the hallmark of an organized, systematic communication network, perhaps a spy ring operating across the Aegean Sea. For over a century, the world's best linguists and cryptographers have tried to break its code. They have looked for patterns, analyzed the frequency of the symbols, and attempted to match them to every known language, from ancient Greek to Egyptian hieroglyphs. Every single attempt has ended in failure. The disk gives up no grammatical rules, no clear starting point, no Rosetta Stone to provide a parallel text. Some argue it is not a language at all, but a religious hymn, a calendar, or even an ancient board game. But if it is a game or a prayer, why go to the extraordinary trouble of creating unique stamps, a technology that appears nowhere else in Minoan culture? The effort implies a need for secrecy and replication that feels inherently operational. The silence of the Phaistos disk is absolute. It is a locked door from the dawn of civilization, and we have spent a century searching for a key that may have been destroyed the day the palace of Phaistos fell. What monumental secret was so important that it required a language for one single purpose, a code that died with its last speaker? The clay holds its message, a spiral of silent witnesses to a secret we may never hear. The most devastating secrets are not stolen by strangers, but given freely by friends. Within the very heart of the British establishment, a group of brilliant young men from Cambridge University forged a bond that would betray their country for decades. We know them as the Cambridge Five: Kim Philby, Guy Burgess, Donald MacLean, Anthony Blunt, and John Cairncross. They were not low-level clerks, but men who rose to the highest echelons of MI6, the Foreign Office, and British intelligence. They handed over thousands of classified documents, exposing Western agents, betraying military plans, and shaping the early Cold War in the Soviet Union's favor. Yet for all we know, the most haunting question remains unanswered. Were there only five? The hunt for the elusive fifth man was a public obsession for years, but that title itself is a misdirection. Even after Cairncross was confirmed, the evidence suggested a network wider and deeper than just five individuals. Who were the sixth and seventh men, the ones whose identities MI5 has never been able to pin down with absolute certainty? These ghosts in the machine were the ones recruited by the original five, a second wave of moles who may have burrowed even deeper, their careers and betrayals continuing long after their handlers had been exposed or had fled to Moscow. The damage they caused was immeasurable. Every Western agent the Soviets identified, every code that was compromised, every Allied strategy that failed, could often be traced back to a leak from this circle. They were not just passing papers, they were actively steering Western policy, with Philby nearly becoming the head of MI6 itself. The lingering fear is that some of these unknown recruits, these sixth men, achieved positions of immense trust and retired with honors, their secrets intact. The full roster of this spy ring is likely locked away, not in London, but in the vast, inaccessible archives of the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service. They have never had a reason to reveal the names of their most successful assets, the ones who were never caught. So the betrayal did not end with the five, it simply faded into silence, leaving a permanent shadow of doubt over an entire generation of British power. How many other hands, now old and frail, helped to shape that shadow? A shadow of a different kind fell across the northernmost edge of the Roman Empire, a darkness that swallowed 5,000 men without a trace. The Ninth Legion, known as Legio Nona Hispana, was a hardened veteran force, a cornerstone of Roman power in the misty province of Britannia. Its last certain appearance in the historical record places it at the fortress of Eboracum, modern-day York, around the year 120 AD. And then, it simply ceases to exist. No chronicler marks its destruction. No monument celebrates its final sacrifice. It just vanishes from the army rolls as if it never was. The silence is deafening. The most popular theory is a brutal, military one. The legion was sent north to subdue the fierce Pictish tribes beyond Hadrian's Wall, and was ambushed and annihilated in some forgotten Scottish glen. The land itself would have swallowed the evidence, leaving no Roman left to tell the tale. This was a catastrophic loss, but a straightforward one, yet the complete absence of any account, any archaeological evidence of a large-scale battle, points to something more sinister than a mere defeat in combat. This is where the espionage angle weaves its threads. Rome was not fighting a simple war against barbarians in Britain. It was engaged in a grand, global Cold War with its great eastern rival, the Parthian Empire. Parthian intelligence was sophisticated, its networks stretching across the known world. What if the Ninth Legion did not march to its doom by accident? What if it was lured into one? A brilliant piece of Parthian disinformation could have been crafted. A forged message from a supposed Roman ally, or a carefully planted rumor of a weak, divided enemy to the north, promising an easy victory. The Roman command, trusting this false intelligence, would have dispatched their premier fighting force directly into a perfectly laid trap, a killing ground prepared by a coalition of tribes who knew the legion was coming. The Romans were masters of military engineering, but they could be deceived. A rival intelligence service would have understood this arrogance, this reliance on seemingly solid information. The trap, once sprung, would have been so total, so complete, that not a single messenger escaped. The Roman authorities, faced with this unimaginable humiliation and a staggering intelligence failure, would have had every reason to cover it up. To admit that their entire northern strategy was manipulated by a foreign power would have been a blow to their prestige, from which they might never recover. It was far better to let the legion simply disappear, to quietly strike its name from the records and never speak of it again, burying the truth to protect the illusion of invincibility. The lost Ninth Legion thus becomes more than a military mystery. It becomes a potential case of history's first great strategic deception, a ghost legion created not by the sword, but by a lie. A monument of polished granite rose from a Georgia field in 1979, its 6 slabs standing 19 feet tall and inscribed with a message for the future. Known as the Georgia Guidestones, it presented 10 principles for humanity in 8 different languages, from English and Russian to Swahili and Hindi. Its instructions were stark, calling for a world population of 500 million, for humanity to live in balance with nature, and for reason to guide a new future. But the true mystery was not the message itself, but the messenger, a man who called himself only R.C. Christian. He claimed this was a pseudonym, and that he represented a small group of Americans who wished to leave guidance for a society rebuilding after a global catastrophe. He paid for the massive project in cash and then vanished, his real identity a secret he carried away. This was not an ancient riddle, but a modern enigma built in plain sight, and its purpose has been fiercely debated ever since. The espionage angle here is compelling. Was this the public front for a clandestine group with a specific geopolitical agenda? The call for a drastically reduced global population and international control could be seen as a blueprint for a new world order, a set of principles meant to be activated after a planned collapse. The monument, then, would not be a hopeful guide, but a chilling mission statement carved in stone, a signal to other initiates that a plan was in motion. Another theory views the Guidestones as a sophisticated piece of psychological operations. In the tense final decade of the Cold War, such a structure could have been a tool for testing public reaction to radical ideas about population control and global governance, a way to gauge societal resilience or fear. The 8 languages suggest an international audience, but for whom was the data being collected? The most intriguing possibility is that the site itself was a dead drop, not for paper messages, but for something far larger. The precise astronomical features of the guide stones, with holes aligned to track the sun and a slot marking the North Star, could have provided a fixed, unchangeable geographic reference point. This could have been a silent, permanent marker for a spy ring to verify locations or to calibrate clandestine navigation equipment, a secret hiding in the most public way imaginable. The mystery only deepened decades later. In 2022, the guidestones were heavily damaged in an explosion and were later fully demolished by the county, erasing the physical puzzle from the landscape. The act of destruction ensured that the true intentions of R.C. Christian and his group would remain an unsolved secret forever. Were they visionaries, propagandists, or spy masters? The granite is gone, but the question remains, a ghost of a message meant for a future that may never come. The ocean off Cheviot Beach is a treacherous expanse of churning water and powerful currents. On a summer morning in December 1967, the Prime Minister of Australia, Harold Holt, waded into that surf for a swim. He was a fit and confident man, at the peak of his political power, a staunch ally of the United States, deeply enmeshed in the secrets of the Vietnam War. Moments later, he was gone, swallowed by the sea without a trace. The official inquest concluded it was a tragic drowning, a simple case of a strong swimmer overwhelmed by nature's fury. But the complete lack of a body and the profound political context of his disappearance have fueled espionage theories for decades. This was not just a man who vanished. He was a walking intelligence asset who disappeared. As a key Western leader, Holt was privy to some of the most sensitive defense and signals intelligence agreements between Australia, the United States, and the United Kingdom. He had just hosted President Lyndon B. Johnson days earlier, their discussions undoubtedly touching on the most classified aspects of the war effort. What if his swim was not an accident, but a pre-arranged rendezvous? One of the most persistent, if outlandish, theories suggests he was picked up by a Chinese submarine waiting just offshore. The logic is chilling. A foreign power could have extracted a Western leader to debrief him for every piece of intelligence he held, from nuclear strategies to the inner workings of Western alliances. His knowledge would have been an immeasurable prize in the Cold War. A more sinister possibility points the finger at his own allies. Holt was a public supporter of the Vietnam War, but intelligence agencies are paid to think in shadows. What if his commitment was seen as wavering in private? Could the American CIA, fearing he might pull Australian troops out of the conflict, have orchestrated an elimination to ensure the war effort remained solid? An accident in the water would be a clean, deniable way to remove a potential problem without a diplomatic firestorm. The circumstances are undeniably strange. The beach was known to be dangerous, yet Holt chose to swim there. Witnesses reported he simply swam beyond the breakers and did not resurface, a strangely passive end for an experienced swimmer. The subsequent search was one of the largest in Australian history, yet not a single piece of clothing, not a shred of evidence was ever recovered from the water. This absolute void of physical proof leaves the door wide open for speculation. Was Harold Holt the victim of a terrible misadventure, or was he the target of a clandestine operation so successful that its truth is buried under layers of state secrets, a permanent casualty of the silent, brutal war fought by intelligence agencies? The waves at Cheviot Beach keep their secret, leaving us to wonder, if a prime minister was lost to the sea, or to the spies who move silently within its depths. A locked box, a set of codes, and a treasure that has tempted fortune hunters for nearly 2 centuries. This is the enduring enigma of the Beale ciphers, a puzzle where the prize is a fortune in gold and silver, and the lock is a code that has resisted every attempt to pick it. The story begins in the 1820s, when a mysterious adventurer named Thomas J. Beale arrived at a Lynchburg, Virginia inn. He entrusted the innkeeper, Robert Morris, with a locked iron box for safekeeping, instructing him not to open it unless he failed to return within 10 years. Beale then vanished, never to be seen again. Morris, honoring his word, waited. It was more than 20 years before he finally broke the lock. Inside, he found 3 sheets of paper, covered in rows of numbers, and 2 letters from Beale explaining the incredible truth. The papers were ciphers. The first detailed the location of a treasure Beale and his party had buried. The second listed the contents of the hoard, and the third named the heirs who were to receive it. This was not just a simple map. It was a sophisticated cryptographic dead drop, a message left for a specific person who knew how to read it. The brilliance of the system is that only one of the 3 ciphers has ever been solved. A persistent cryptographer eventually cracked the second cipher by using a specific key, the wording of the United States Declaration of Independence. Each number in the cipher corresponded to a word in the Declaration, and the first letter of that word spelled out the message. It revealed a staggering inventory, over 2,000 pounds of gold and thousands more of silver, a treasure worth tens of millions today. This success proved the ciphers were real, but it made the failure to solve the other 2 all the more maddening. The first cipher, the one that holds the exact location of the vault in Bedford County, Virginia, and the third, listing the heirs, remain utterly unbreakable. Why would only one key work? This selective decryption is the heart of the espionage mystery. Was Beale part of a secret society, like the Freemasons, and were these ciphers a way to safeguard their collective wealth? The location, known only to a closed circle of initiates who possessed the unique keys? Or was this the operational ledger of a criminal enterprise? A band of robbers who buried their loot and used complex codes to ensure no single member could betray the others. The fact that the Declaration of Independence worked for one cipher suggests the other keys are contemporary, publicly available documents from the same era, perhaps a specific book, a pamphlet, or another founding text. Yet despite over a century of effort, using everything from the Constitution to Shakespeare's plays, no one has found the right key. The most haunting possibility is that the entire thing is an elaborate, brilliant hoax, a story crafted by Morris or someone else to create a legendary treasure hunt from thin air. But if it is a hoax, why did the second cipher work so perfectly, describing a believable treasure in precise detail? The Beale ciphers stand as a perfect locked room mystery. The treasure, if it is real, is not just buried in the Virginia soil. It is buried in a code, a secret so well protected that it has remained safe for 200 years, waiting for the one person who can ask the right document the right question. The cobblestone streets of Stockholm were slick with a cold February rain in 1986. Prime Minister Olof Palme, a man who led without bodyguards, believing in a direct connection to his people, was walking home from the cinema with his wife. In an instant, the night was shattered by gunfire. Palme was shot in the back and died on the sidewalk. His assassination was not a remote, secure event, but a brutal, public execution that sent a shockwave through the neutral heart of Sweden. The investigation began in chaos. The crime scene was not sealed for hours. Evidence was trampled, and witness testimonies became a tangled mess. This was not the clean, precise work of a professional intelligence agency. It was a perfect storm of confusion. one that many believe was either exploited or deliberately engineered to cover the assassin's tracks. For decades, the case remained a festering wound, a labyrinth of dead ends and false leads. The espionage angles are impossible to ignore because Olof Palme was no ordinary leader. He was a global figure, a vocal and passionate critic of both American intervention in Vietnam and Soviet oppression in Eastern Europe. He fiercely condemned the apartheid regime in South Africa, positioning himself as a thorn in the side of multiple world powers. This made him a target with a very long list of potential enemies. Was his murder a covert operation by a foreign intelligence service designed to silence a troublesome voice? The South African theory is one of the most persistent. The apartheid government's security forces were known for their ruthless international operations, and Palme's support for the African National Congress made him a primary enemy. Did they send a hit squad to neutral Sweden, a country they saw as actively undermining their racist regime? The possibility of a contract killing using a local criminal with ties to right-wing extremist groups has been heavily investigated, with tantalizing financial trails leading back to South Africa. Another compelling thread leads to Kurdish separatist groups. Palme's Sweden had granted asylum to many Kurds, but some factions believed he was not doing enough to support their cause, or worse, that he was an obstacle. Could an agent from a militant Kurdish organization have decided to make a brutal statement on a global stage? Then there is the possibility of a lone wolf, but one whose path was suspiciously intertwined with the world of shadows. The most recent official suspect, convicted in 2022 after years of investigation, was a man with a history of violence and a strange, obsessive fixation on Palme. Yet, many investigators and legal experts find the evidence against him entirely circumstantial, a convenient closure for a case that embarrassed a nation. They argue the real truth points upward, to a conspiracy where the shooter was merely a tool, an asset manipulated by handlers whose identities are buried in the classified files of intelligence agencies from Washington to Pretoria to Moscow. The true masterminds understood that the best assassinations are those where the blame is scattered, the motive is clouded, and the public is left arguing over shadows. The murder of Olof Palme remains a cold case, not for a lack of suspects, but for an overabundance of them, each pointing to a different, silent war being fought on the peaceful streets of Stockholm. A different kind of silence awaited a ship named the Mary Celeste in the cold expanse of the Atlantic Ocean. In December 1872, the British brigantine de Gracia spotted the merchant vessel drifting aimlessly, her sails partially set and tattered. Captain Morehouse, a friend of the Mary Celeste's master, Benjamin Briggs, sent a boarding party across. They found the ship in a state of eerie perfection, completely seaworthy with a 6-month supply of food and water. The crew of 10, along with the captain's wife and 2-year-old daughter, were gone. Not a soul remained, yet the personal belongings of all on board were untouched, their valuables and even jewelry still in the cabins. This was not a scene of piracy or plunder. It was a voluntary and sudden exodus from a perfectly sound vessel. The last entry in the ship's logbook, dated 10 days earlier, was utterly mundane, noting routine weather and position, offering no hint of the terror or urgency that must have followed. So why would an experienced captain and his entire crew abandon their ship, their home, and all their worldly possessions into a lifeboat they then towed behind them, only to vanish forever in the open sea? The espionage theory offers a chilling alternative to tales of giant squid or waterspouts. The Mary Celeste was carrying a cargo of denatured alcohol, a volatile industrial solvent. What if that cargo was not its only, or even its primary, shipment? Could the ship have been a clandestine courier, its hold secretly carrying sensitive documents, a new weapons technology, or even a person being smuggled across the Atlantic. A covert meeting at sea with another vessel could have gone catastrophically wrong. Perhaps the rendezvous was a trap, or the other ship was hostile, forcing the crew to flee under threat of capture or death. The presence of the captain's family on board makes this theory even more compelling, as it would be the perfect cover for a seemingly innocent voyage. Another possibility involves the cargo itself. Denatured alcohol can produce powerful, potentially explosive fumes. If the crew mistakenly believed the ship was about to blow, they might have taken to the lifeboat as a precaution, tethering it to the ship to wait out the danger. A sudden squall could have then snapped the line, setting the Mary Celeste adrift and dooming the lifeboat to the vast, unforgiving ocean. This explains the orderly abandonment and the untouched valuables, but it does not fully explain why such seasoned mariners would make such a fatal miscalculation unless they were acting on flawed or panicked information. The single most telling clue was the state of the ship when found. One of its pumps was disassembled, and there was a significant amount of water in the hold, though not nearly enough to sink the sturdy vessel. A cut was found on the railing, perhaps made in a frantic hurry, and a sword was discovered lying beneath the captain's bed. These are the fragments of a story we can never fully assemble. The Mary Celeste was sailed to port, but the mystery was never solved. No bodies were ever recovered, no lifeboat was ever found. The ship itself became a ghost, its true story lost between the lines of a mundane logbook and the silent, empty quarters where a child's toys once lay. Was this a maritime accident, or was it an espionage operation that ended in a silent, desperate escape? The ocean holds the only testimony, and it speaks in whispers too faint for anyone to hear. A different kind of riddle is carved not on clay or paper, but in weathered stone on the grounds of an English estate. At Shugborough Hall, nestled on the Shepherd's Monument, is a sequence of 8 letters that has defied explanation for centuries. It reads OUOSVAVV, framed clearly by 2-letter DS. Just below this cryptic text is a mysterious mirror image of a famous painting by Nicholas Poussin, The Shepherds of Arcadia, which itself depicts shepherds gathered around a tomb, seemingly deciphering an inscription that reads, Et in Arcadia ego. This entire arrangement is a puzzle box set in a pastoral landscape, and the theories surrounding it are as grand as they are convoluted. Many have been drawn to the connection with the Priory of Sion, a shadowy secret society supposedly dedicated to guarding the bloodline of Jesus Christ and the secret of the Holy Grail. Poussin's painting is a cornerstone of this modern mythos, and its presence here, reversed on the monument, suggests the Ansons, the family who built it, were initiates embedding a profound secret into their property. Was this code meant to point the way to the Grail itself, a spiritual treasure hidden somewhere on the grounds? Yet a more grounded, and perhaps more plausible, theory points away from religious relics and toward naval espionage and literal treasure. The monument was commissioned by the Anson family, and its most famous son was Admiral George Anson, a legendary naval commander. In a daring circumnavigation of the globe, he captured an immense Spanish galleon, the Nuestra Señora de Covadonga, seizing a fortune in silver and gold. Could this code, OUOSVAVV, be a cipher relating to the location of a portion of that captured treasure, or perhaps contain secret naval intelligence about Spanish shipping routes or British naval strategies? The admiral would have been deeply enmeshed in the world of state secrets and coded messages. This inscription could be a private, permanent dead drop, its meaning clear only to a select few within his circle. The failure to solve it is a testament to its design. Brilliant minds, including the author Charles Dickens, and teams of modern codebreakers who cracked Nazi enigma machines, have applied their skills to this short sequence of letters. They have tried everything from simple substitution ciphers to complex mathematical models, yet no solution has ever gained universal acceptance. The letters resist every key. This suggests the code is not a standard cipher, but something far more personal. Its key a specific book, a family motto, or a shared memory that died with the Anson family. The secret of Shugborough is not just in the code, but in the mind of the person who carved it, a silent message meant for one set of eyes, now lost to time. Was it a map to a heavenly or an earthly treasure? The stone offers no answer, only the enduring whisper of its 8 enigmatic letters. A sheet of computer printout, marked with a scientist's astonished hand, holds a secret from the stars. On an August night in 1977, the Big Ear radio telescope at Ohio State University was engaged in its routine scan of the heavens, listening for the silent whispers of the cosmos. Suddenly, the machine registered a signal so powerful and so strange that it defied all conventional explanation. It lasted for 72 seconds, a focused burst of intensity that rose and fell as the telescope's fixed gaze swept across a small patch of space near the constellation Sagittarius. The signal was narrowband, concentrated on a specific frequency that is naturally quiet in the universe, a frequency that many scientists believe would be an ideal choice for interstellar communication. When researcher Jerry Amon reviewed the data the next day, he was so stunned by its perfect characteristics that he circled the alphanumeric sequence on the printout and wrote a single, powerful word in the margin: "Wow." The signal was never heard again. This is not a story of alien visitation, but one of profound and enduring mystery, a 72-second enigma that could be the most significant piece of signals intelligence ever intercepted, if only we knew its source. The core of the espionage mystery lies in the signal's unnatural perfection. It bore the hallmarks of a deliberate transmission, a beacon, or a message. But what if the source was not from the depths of space, but from much closer to home? In the tense climate of the Cold War, could this have been an incredibly advanced form of human signals intelligence? One compelling theory suggests it was a one-time burst from a secret satellite or a ground-based military test, a powerful radar or communication beam that was briefly and accidentally reflected off a piece of space debris, bouncing the signal directly into the Big Ear's receiver. The transmission might have used a frequency and a pattern so advanced that it mimicked what scientists would expect from an extraterrestrial source, a secret project that was either never repeated or whose true purpose remains locked in a classified file. This possibility transforms the WOW signal from a cosmic greeting into a potential intelligence leak, a fleeting glimpse of a technology so secret that even its creators may not have known it was briefly broadcasting to the stars. Despite decades of searching and countless follow-up observations, the signal has never reappeared. This absolute silence is what makes the espionage theory so haunting. A natural astronomical event would likely recur, and an alien civilization might try again, but a secret human-made test would be a one-off event, a singular experiment that was completed and then shut down, its purpose served and its existence denied. The WOW signal thus stands at the crossroads of two great quests: the search for extraterrestrial intelligence and the investigation of our own most clandestine technologies. It asks us a deeply unsettling question: were we listening to a message from another world, or were we accidentally overhearing a secret we were never meant to know? Deep within the grim cellar of the Ipatiev house, amid the brutal aftermath of the Romanov executions, a different kind of plunder began. The Tsar and his family were dead, but the imperial jewels they had sewn into their very clothing, a last-ditch portable fortune, presented an immediate and tantalizing mystery. While the Bolsheviks inventoried some of the larger pieces, A significant portion of these personal gems, diamonds and pearls, meticulously stitched into corsets and hatbands, simply vanished from the official record. Their disappearance ignited a shadow war, a desperate scramble for the physical remnants of a fallen dynasty, fought by spies and adventurers on both sides of the Russian Civil War. The Bolsheviks saw these jewels as a vital currency for their revolution, a means to fund propaganda and covert operations abroad. They had every incentive to quietly liquidate the treasures through underground networks in Europe, converting Romanov wealth into bullets and pamphlets to fuel their cause. This was economic espionage on a grand scale, turning the crown's own gems into weapons against it. Opposing them were the White Russians and their allied intelligence agents, who were just as determined to reclaim the fortune, both to finance their own faltering military campaign and to preserve a symbolic legacy. This is where figures like Sidney Riley, the legendary ace of spies, enter the story. Riley was a master of deception, deeply enmeshed in various monarchist plots to save the Romanovs. While those rescue missions failed, his intricate web of contacts and his operations within Russia itself placed him in a unique position to have learned the fate of the missing jewels. He moved through the same shadowy corridors where such treasures would be fenced or smuggled. Was he working to secure them for the white cause, or was he, a man known for playing all sides, maneuvering to control the fortune for his own enigmatic purposes? The jewels were the ultimate prize in a high-stakes game of intelligence, their trail obscured by double agents and false leads. Some gems undoubtedly made it out, perhaps smuggled by loyalists who used them to sustain immigrant communities in Paris and Berlin. Others may have been seized by Bolshevik operatives and funneled to sympathetic regimes or sold on the black market to arms dealers. The final disposition of this portable fortune is a hidden chapter, its pages written in code and settled with secret transactions. These were not just stones, they were the last hope of a family and the liquid assets of a world at war with itself, their glittering trail leading not to a treasure chest, but into the silent, impenetrable archives of espionage. A ghost flickered across television screens in Chicago on a quiet November night in 1987. For 2 brief, surreal intrusions, the familiar broadcast of 2 major stations was hijacked. In its place was a distorted figure in a rubber mask, the grinning, stuttering likeness of the pop culture character, Max Headroom. The audio was a garble of reversed speech, random noises, and a bizarre monologue. He mumbled about catching the wave, smacked himself with a rubber glove, and at one point had his trousers pulled down by an unseen accomplice. Then, as abruptly as it began, the signal was restored, leaving a million viewers bewildered and a mystery that remains the ultimate prank, or perhaps a chillingly effective test of vulnerability. The technical skill required was not trivial. To override the powerful transmitters of WGN and WTTW, the hijacker needed precise knowledge of broadcast engineering and access to highly specialized, expensive equipment. This was not a simple act of vandalism. It was a surgical strike on the nervous system of mass media itself. The question of motive transforms this bizarre event from a prank into a potential case of early cyber espionage. Was this the work of a lone, brilliant hacker, a disgruntled employee simply proving it could be done? Or was it something far more calculated? The sheer strangeness of the broadcast, its deliberately unsettling and nonsensical nature, echoes the tactics of psychological warfare. A state actor or a private intelligence firm could have orchestrated the intrusion as a field test, a dry run to demonstrate how easily they could seize a nation's primary source of information and inject chaos, all under the perfect cover of a seemingly juvenile joke. The fact that the perpetrators were never caught is the most telling clue of all. They executed a flawless operation, leaving behind no digital fingerprints in an analog age, no boasts, no claims of responsibility. The Max Headroom incident is a ghost in the machine, a 2-minute warning from the shadows that our most trusted systems are only as secure as the most clever person who wants to break them. Was it a joke, or was it the first quiet shot in a war we are still fighting today? A war for control over the very signals that shape our reality. We have traveled through a labyrinth of 25 silent histories, from iron masks to vanished legions, from undeciphered codes to treasures swallowed by the earth. Each case is a monument to the shadow world, a testament to the brilliant, often ruthless tradecraft that operates beyond our sight. These are stories of devastating betrayals from within the most trusted circles, and of secrets so meticulously guarded they have outlasted empires and dynasties. They remind us that history is not just the record of what we know, but the profound and haunting silence of what we do not. The real power of espionage lies not in the secrets stolen, but in those that remain forever locked away. So we leave you with one final question to ponder, a key that could unlock a door to an entirely different past. Which of these mysteries do you think holds the key to rewriting a chapter of history? Was it the silent flight of the Alaska object, the final message of the Somerton Man, or the hidden purpose of the Georgia Guidestones? Tell us your own theories and which case captured your imagination in the comments below. And if you are ready to journey deeper into the world's greatest unsolved puzzles, subscribe now for our next exploration into the shadows of history.